Hello, hello. What's going on, Josh Spodek? How are you?
Hey, great to be here again. I've been watching you and some of the other people, and I really like watching your guys' conversations.
Nice, thank
and
you.
being in it.
Well, you're here. You're in it in the SoulBuffalo Earth Report, episode 21. I think you're the first repeat guest, which is super exciting. So
I'm
we got to
honored.
make sure we charter new territory today. But Joshua Spodek, I'm super excited to have you here. For those of you that don't know Josh, he is, I would say, a bit of a radical with some of his ideas, and a lot of his radical ideas need to become commonplace sooner than later. He's a teacher. He's an author. He has an incredible podcast called Leadership in the Environment. And right, did I get that right?
Yeah, we're rebranding to This Sustainable Life, but we haven't made that shift yet. So sneak preview.
Right. See, I knew I needed to clarify there. But Josh, what's going on, man? Tell me about what's going on with your podcast, because I'm fascinated. You've been doing it for a really long time. There's a lot of momentum going on.
Yes, in fact, today's December 7th, which means that we are 3 years and 7 days into my podcast. We just had the anniversary. And I know that it was in November because anyone thinking about starting a podcast, it's a really scary thing, because here's what happened. In October 3 years ago, I said, all right, in November, I will start this podcast. And if you look at the timestamp of my very first one, it's November 30th, 11:59 p.m. in like 30 seconds, because my heart is like racing. I was really scared. I didn't have any experience I did so many first episodes that I recorded throughout before finally, I was like, this has got to go. So I was very nervous. Commenting on that, it is a tremendous growth experience to learn about yourself, your own fears, both in putting yourself out there, but also I've had to become much more open about my behaviors and things that I was like, oh, no one will notice that I do this. No one will notice that I do that. It's really important stuff. But most of all, more than anything else, is the people that I've met. My strategy that has emerged through doing the podcast is to bring very well-known, influential people from many different areas, but leaders, to the environment, because I think the environment lacks leadership. Lots of managers, people telling people what to do, facts and figures, things like that. But leadership, empathy, compassion, giving people stories, images, beliefs, that I don't see a whole lot of.
Well, tell us some of the stories. Tell us some of the guests and some of the stories that you've unlocked over the past 3 years.
Oh man, so many. Which was my favorite? There's like a tie of number one place for all of them. The first one that comes to mind. Do you know John Lee Dumas? He's a big entrepreneur podcaster. He's got Entrepreneurs on Fire, and
the
I met him
he's
pretty big, and I met him once when he was speaking, and I said, do you want to be on my podcast? He said, sure. So he comes on the podcast, and there has emerged through doing a lot of episodes, a process that I go through. And my first TEDx talk describes the process. It's a 4-step process to have someone share what they care about. And then I invite them to act on what they care about. Now, I don't tell them what to do. A lot of people think, oh, you get people to do small things. Big or small is not the point. And it's not me telling them what to do. It's having them share what they care about. Their apple tree at the end of the block, when they grew up, that got paved over to make a gas station. In my case, there's the sledding hill at the end of the block that I used to go to, but they kept widening the road in between me and the sledding hill, so it became farther and farther away. Now in Philadelphia, we don't get enough snow to sled that often. I mean, I'm in New York now, but at home where I grew up, we rarely have snow like we did before. And that's what's in my heart. And I get that out from people. And then I said, what can you do to act on that? So John committed to, this is what made him come up first. At first he says, I don't really care that much about the environment. It's not that big a deal to me. He's protecting himself. He cares about the water he drinks, the air he breathes. And we go back and forth until he starts sharing. And he talks about how when he goes running, he comes back, he lives near the beach, and the beach is always covered with plastic. So you can imagine there's frustration, there's feelings of helplessness. And I say, would you care to do something to act on those feelings? And he comes up on his own. He says, I'll pick up garbage from the beach. And I say, let's make it a SMART goal. I forget it. I listen to the episode to get exactly what happened. You can hear it. It's all recorded. But I helped the person by saying, let's make it specific and time bound. So he says, all right, once a month for the next calendar year, I will bring a garbage bag and pick up all the garbage I can find on the beach once a month for a year. So 6 months in, I said, can we talk about it along the way? He goes, yeah, 6 months in, he's like doing it. After a year, he's done it for a year. When his family came to visit, he takes his niece down and they do it together. His neighbors asked him about it. By the end of the year, he was somewhere where we saw like a bunch of rebar, some construction material lying out, and it wasn't on the beach, but he's like, I can't do this. I can't pass this by without doing it. So he hauls this big bunch of stuff because he likes it. See, when I ask someone what they care about, I sacrifice the direction. I can't say, I want you to work on plastic or I want you to work on food. But what I get is that they're doing it from the heart. And it may be big, it may be small, what they do at first. But if they like it, they'll do it again. And they'll talk about it. So I'm not going to argue that little things don't add up. I'm happy for people to do little things. But my game is to get people to do things that they care about. If they care about it enough, they'll keep doing it more. And then they'll get to big things. And then they'll share it.
Conversations that you and I have. I mean, for those of you that don't know Josh, his entire year worth of trash you could fit into like a.
Can I show it? It's like right there. So the on the chair there's a canvas bag. That is 1 year's worth of garbage. It'll be 1 year in a couple of weeks.
There you go. So that's not a lot of garbage. So you clearly have to listen. When I said radical earlier, you clearly have to live a radical life in our sort of modern day flirtation with consumerism. Or I shouldn't say flirtation. It would say like a deep marriage with consumerism and capitalism. But what about what else? Because that's sort of just scratching the surface. What else?
Well, I have to say that I would have said it the way that you said it before. So that the little garbage, by my standards, a lot of garbage. That to me is still a lot. It now is. I would have said the same thing because when I challenged myself at the beginning, could I go for a week without buying any packaged food? I had no idea if I'd make it 1 week. And so I would have said not buying, anything from any aisle in the supermarket would be a challenge. Now I identify that stuff. I don't even call that stuff food. I think I've told you about my word doof for like not food.
I've heard of doof.
Yeah. And to me, it's all fresh fruits and vegetables, buying legumes and nuts from the bulk section with a bag that I bring myself. And I would have called this radical before, probably. But now I think the other way is just like this big detour from the fresh fruits, vegetables, and nuts and the seeds and legumes that we grew up, that's what grows. And it costs less. It's totally accessible for someone living in a food desert. I've been invited up to the Bronx by a single mom saying like, how can we do what you do? She was a guest on the podcast too. That was another great guest. If you look up Rhonda on my podcast. So I met her at this potluck lunch and everyone's like, Josh, you can do this because you live in the Greenwich Village and you got the farmer's market near you and you got all these resources around you. And they don't know that I endeavor to make what I do accessible. So I'm sitting next to this woman and it comes out that she's a single mom up in the Bronx. I'm like, sounds like a food desert. And I say, come on over for my famous no packaging vegan stew. And she's like, don't mind if I do. So you can hear her over at my place. And she brought her son over because she didn't have anyone to watch the son. And eventually she invites me up to a community center up in the Bronx. And the last talk that I gave before the pandemic was I was up there, I brought up my pressure cooker and brought up the vegetables and I showed them how to do it. And the first person said, we can't do it here because we don't have the access. And the next person said, actually, I know where you can get this. And the next person said, I know where you can get that. And after a little while, they were all figuring out. And she said, the way she put it was, you planted the seed that we can do this. McDonald's, the fast food, they're not doing anyone any favors. They're not helping anyone. They're impoverishing. This is a way out. That was the message I got from them. It takes a while to get to where you don't look at Twinkies as food. At least it did for me because I'm looking at my freezer, which always had Ben and Jerry's in it for decades.
I think it's interesting. Whenever I talk to you, it's like looking in the mirror with my own consumerism, and I always go back to my past consumerism, which I was before I got into this environmental work. I was just completely like the quintessential unconscious consumer that bought whatever whenever I wanted, right? And it's been amazing to like track that in the last 3 years and how far I've come. But also, whenever I see you, it reminds me of just how much further I can go. I think we were talking like 6 months ago, and afterwards I realized I had to immediately get a hybrid car after the conversation, which I did, and I'm super happy about. But just in general, man, I mean, it's like, it's hard. It's really hard to do these types. It's amazing, the story that you told earlier, about the beach walk and the beach clean. And it's like, what does that look like for all of us? I mean, there's like trash. I'm in the country. I'm like a couple hours north of New York City. There's trash all along the roads where we're driving, which is crazy. Like, people drive around and just throw stuff out the windows. It seems to be more commonplace than you would think. But it's like, how do, and I think what you've done is help scale this message, and help scale this, I can do this message. So talk a little bit about that, in the context of your podcast.
Before the podcast, since I teach at NYU, I gave a series of talks at NYU. And I thought, I'm going to tell them about the science. I'm going to tell them what to do. It was terrible. It was just, to put it nicely, it was a great learning experience, because everyone's like, well, you know this already, stop lecturing. Don't tell us what to do. The podcast led me to realize telling people what to do it hasn't been effective for me. What's much more effective is connecting. When you said you're buying the hybrid, the most important thing that I heard was that you love it. You're happy. That emotion is, to me, that's leaders work with emotion more than facts and figures. And so if you like it, you'll do more. And I try to connect with stories, with images, with beliefs. And I learned so much from my guests. Like the people I had from the military, for example. I had a couple colonels at West Point, just interviewed a 4-star general, retired, interviewed a 3-star Marine Corps general before that. And I was up at West Point and speaking to the cadets. What I learned about service, like today, the country for the past bunch of elections has been like roughly 50-50. So that means that they're going to defend the Constitution. For half the people are going to be acting against their own interests. They're defending people that they fundamentally disagree with, and they love it. It's a passion. That's so important to them. And that feeling of service for me is so much more motivational, motivates me so much more than, whatever someone might think I'm giving up by not getting, whatever packaged food they're getting. I'm not getting Impossible Burgers. And what I get is a connection to people. Likewise, I've just had a few evangelicals on the podcast, and I'm not a particularly religious person, but the joy and passion that they do things with, they're not doing it because they have to, they're doing it because they get to. And I feel that way. That's emerged from working with a lot of people, but they really, if I want to bring leaders from lots of different areas, I'm going to bring people in from fields I've never been in before. And that's tremendously valuable. Talking to people I don't normally talk to.
Tell me some, so military, evangelicals, business leaders, I know really across the business spectrum, like who are some of the other types of archetypes that you bring on the podcast?
Athletes, the most viewed TED Talk of all time. I've had a whole bunch of TED Talkers, a couple of Pulitzer Prize winners.
Who's the most viewed TED Talk of all time?
Sir Ken Robinson, who recently passed away.
Yeah. Brilliant guy. Education TED Talk.
Man, I would just ask him a question and he'd speak for 5 minutes, and those 5 minutes would have been themselves one of the top TED Talks of all time. It's just, he knows his business, education.
I remember that TED Talk. That's amazing. So who else? What other type of?
Athletes, scientists, let's see. A lot of people from, like, I try to get people, like business people. Like, I got the 3-time global managing director of McKinsey. I could only get him for one episode, so I didn't get to hear what came next after, what he did. But then there's also some personalities like leadership gurus. Like I just had Chester Elton, who was just rated the number 4 leadership guru. Marshall Goldsmith, who was rated the number 1 leadership guru. And everyone brings a different angle. Oh, and I got to tell you that the big thing, what makes me most excited. Are you about to say something?
No. I'm.
Is that I've been putting out for a while, realizing that whomever I reach, there's more people that I'm not going to reach than I will. Even if I reached like millions of people, that would be one of the bigger podcasts. Like if I reached Joe Rogan type numbers, that's still very small compared to the planet. So I've always wanted to, or for a long time, I've realized I have to get people who are going to reach different audiences than I do. And I put that up for a long time. And then finally someone came to me and said, I want to do what you've been talking about, a new episode. So leadership in the environment, Sweden began. So there's a guy in Sweden, and I realized, this guy's going to get Greta before I get Greta. But that's good.
You get Greta, you get Greta.
I haven't got, he could just walk across town and speak to her in Swedish.
Nice.
So, and then there's leadership in the environment in Italy just began. Then there's a woman in the UK, a guy in Kyoto. And the guy in Kyoto he's not doing it based on geography. Like the Italian one is Italian. There's a nice language community there, although he's really into soccer too. So he might do some soccer stuff too. The guy in Kyoto is American. He's an engineer. So he's doing leadership in the environment, applied science, because he really wants to work on engineering and what the technical solutions that people are coming up with. And he's going to meet the top people working on the top projects around the world on this. And I wouldn't reach them. And so it's reaching a new audience that I wouldn't have reached otherwise. Today's Monday. So on, it was a couple of days ago, we had our host summit. And so there's a community of the hosts, and we're getting together and saying, the ones who are just getting started, like, I'm so scared about doing my first episode. It's hard to do. And like, how do I do the microphones and, the basic stuff? And the ones that have been doing it longer are like, I can't believe that now that I've done a few episodes, I'm finding my voice. I'm realizing there are people that I would have thought I never could have reached, and now I can reach them. And the real cool thing was one guy who, he was so nervous, and he took so long to put his first episode out. And his second episode took a long time. And finally he's put a few episodes out. And there's a new guy who hasn't put his first one out yet. And he said, I'm looking to your example of doing my first episode. And the other guy was like, he hadn't yet transitioned from 0 to, I don't know how many he's up to now. But suddenly he realized someone else is less experienced than I am. And that catapulted him forward. So you can see the confidence growing. And I know that it's only a matter of time.
Such a support group. I mean, we started these 21 episodes ago. We've been doing them twice a week. The Earth Report from 3 to 3:30 on Tuesday and Thursday. Mostly today is a Monday exception. But you're right though. I mean, once you start doing it, it just kind of gets to be normal. And the more, I think, when you're like on the air podcasting like this or LinkedIn Live or whatever, you get used to it. You get in a flow and a rhythm. So it's amazing that there's that support mechanism that you have in your community. We
stumbled into it. I didn't realize. I mean, I was just going out and saying, will anyone do this? And for like a year and a half, no one responded. And then once the first person did, then the second one was not long. And then the next one was like I hope someone listening to me now, if they would like to do a leadership in the environment podcast and reach an audience that, someone's going to get leadership in the environment Hollywood, and they're going to be working with like Brad Pitt and people like that. Or someone's going to get leadership in the environment tennis, and they'll be with Agassi or Federer or Serena. Or someone will get leadership in the environment hip hop, and they're going to get 50 Cent or whoever. And, they're going to dwarf me, and that's fine, because I'm working with the people that I want to work with. And if it grows, I know that the way John Lee Dumas felt when he was picking up garbage is the way that I feel when I'm picking up garbage, or the way that I feel when I'm putting all the work in that no one knows about. But really when I'm hearing other people making a difference, because after John Lee Dumas did his thing, that got me started plogging. Before that, I'd heard about plogging, which is picking up garbage when you jog. And I thought,
that plogging. I like that though.
Yeah, look it up. And so him picking his garbage up inspired me back. Also, I had this Olympic gold medalist who also won the CrossFit Games. And my researching her for the podcast, I saw that she did push-ups, a type of push-up in one of her workouts that she put online, where when she went down, she took her hands off the ground and then put her hands. Not a big deal. It's just a little more of an honest push-up. And so now when I do my burpees, which I do daily, one of the variations I do is that. And every time that I do that, I think of her because she inspired me to do that. I get so much inspiration from my guests. One of the, which one was it? The Italian guy, he was interviewing someone, and he's still early at it. So he wasn't very good at getting the person to share what they cared about and getting them to think of something they could do for it. So I can't tell because it was in Italian. I don't speak Italian, but he told me what happened was the guy said, I can't really think of anything. And so he said, can we talk again later? And I'll come up with something if I can. And so he says, okay, sure. his guest emails him later and says, in a dream, he came up with what he was going to do.
What was that?
I don't know. I don't speak Italian.
I want to know. I want to know.
I'll get the transcription for you.
No,
But I think
it's like, you and I have, become friends, and we jump on the phone every while. And like I said, it's like this opportunity to like start thinking about like, all right, how can I be more authentic? Because we're very knee deep in consumerism with the plastic issue that we're working. I mean, if you ask anybody, and it doesn't matter if it's a petrochemical leader or an environmental NGO, who the most important stakeholder is in the plastic equation, it's the consumer. And how do you get the consumer to care more? The consumer does care, and that's why we're starting to see huge corporations shift significantly with respect to plastics, right? I mean, the consumer cares that turtles have straws up their nose and that they're walking on beaches and the beaches are littered with plastic. But like, what can the consumer do, right? And a lot of that is like figuring out your local recycling infrastructure. A lot of that is figuring out what you're buying at the store. You and I go back and forth about strawberries and blueberries. Right. So I'm going to confessional.
It's not about the strawberry blueberries. It's the feeling behind it. It's because here, like
I have a 4-year-old that loves strawberries and blueberries.
Systemic change
come in clamshells where I live, and they're not recycled. So you basically just got to throw them in the trash. So Josh and I have been talking about strawberry and blueberries, and what do you do with a 4-year-old that loves fruit if you can't buy these strawberries and blueberries in a way that is sustainable per se? So so when I go to the store and I look at the strawberries and blueberries, I think of Josh.
So for me, it's not what you get rid of. If you focus on what you get rid of, you're always going to feel like you're missing something. So if I really focused on Ben & Jerry's, I never would have stopped getting it. Or for me, it was also the Snyder's of Hanover pretzel bits, because I used to like the cheddar cheese flavor and the jalapeno flavor and the honey mustard flavor. I would always have them.
I should stop you. Are you like looking at Loop and looking at some of these reuse and refill opportunities where you can send the containers back? You can send your, I think it's Ben & Jerry's, but definitely I know that Unilever's involved, and you can get ice cream in a tin container and then you send it at the end of the day.
Tom Zaki was one of my guests too.
Tom Zaki's an advisor. He's an amazing dude. But yes,
So you've heard the story about the maggots and with the hot stuff that he had at Princeton? You don't heard the story?
Do you want to retell it?
One of his early things, I'm not going to get the details right, but he was doing something about composting, and I think it was at Princeton at the time. So he goes to the food services and says, "Can we get some of your compost?" And they go, "Yeah." So he's got this composter that's going to be delivered, like some industrial thing that someone's going to deliver, and the person is late, and it's the summer, so they put barrels full of food waste that the students didn't eat from the cafeteria, and they're getting hot under the barrels. And finally, the food composter comes, and he's got to take these barrels and open them up and pour them into this thing. And so there's horrible smells. It's super heavy. It's maggots, and it's all disgusting. And he's telling the story. He told me the story one-on-one, but I saw him give it later at NYU at this. Is Tansi? Do you work with Tansi Whelan?
We do. She's an advisor.
Yeah, she was in the article. And I'm sitting there talking to her, and I was talking to some students, and they were commenting on him being up there. And I said, he did those things. That's why he's up there. It seems like picking up garbage, dealing with like big vats of thrown away food is, if you got it, this is what I'm learning is if you want to stand tall, you have to get on your knees. We've all heard it. And it's this phrase, systemic change begins with personal transformation. There's a huge ethos out there that says only governments and corporations can act on the scale necessary. Now, I agree that we need to get governments and corporations, but that does not mean that they should act first. They will act when they get brought kicking and screaming, and because we all want to act too. And when we act and we find the joy in these things, then we'll act more and more and more. And yes, by all means, get governments and corporations on board. By all means, don't expect that they're going to do it without us acting on our own. The big thing that no one gets is that when you act, it's not a burden. It's not a chore. It's not something we have to do. It's not something that's distracting from what really matters. It augments everything. I'm in no way missing Ben & Jerry's. I'm in no way missing the Snyder's of Hanover pretzel bits that I used to have. In fact, if someone put that in front of me now, I'd like move away from it. I wouldn't want it. Not because I'm so hardcore, because there's nothing in it. Because when I eat an apple, especially if it's from the farmer's market, and it's not the shiny, perfect one in the store, but it has much more flavor. And apples to me are like, of all the fruit, they're probably the like least exciting. They're like the regular one, right? Everyone has apples all the time, not like mangoes or passion fruit or something like that, or
right.
durian. But the sweetness that I get from apples now that my taste buds have recovered is so much greater than anything I ever got from Ben and Jerry's. So it's less sugar, more sweet. That's exactly what I want in my life. More nuance, more subtlety. So I can get, when strawberries come in season, so I'm always looking forward to like May, June, like, I can't wait for the strawberries to come in season, because the cherries have been in season a little bit usually by then. I haven't had them for 10 months, but I love them. My net joy of strawberry experience is probably greater now.
Because you're eating them in season rather than eating them all year long.
Yeah. It's like, when I was in college, I would drink to get drunk. Now, every now and then I'll have some scotch, and much, much less alcohol, total alcohol consumption than before, but much greater appreciation and joy. And if I said this to me, I don't know how I would have said this to me to hear this like 10 years ago, because I probably would have been in one ear. I'd be like, yeah, right. Yeah. But that's been my experience.
I mean, it's similar in different ways, but it's been my experience too. I mean, again, to go from this like unconscious consumer, which I'm guilty as charged for a huge portion of my life, to being really trying to think through as many decisions as I can. And I'm far from perfect. And we definitely in our household use way more trash than you do, but we also recycle pretty well, so it's just constant. There's this need as an individual to just constantly think about what you're doing and what you're buying and how that affects. I mean, you go as far as not flying on planes anywhere either, which is like next to impossible for me at this time, I think. But I mean, I think it's interesting when you start to like line all that stuff up, and I mean, your carbon footprint is next to nothing,
Well, it was hard for me until it wasn't, and then it became a part of my identity and a part of my sense of who I am. And that's why I don't like if someone calls me radical or extreme. I'm on the same spectrum as anyone. But I don't mean, the spectrum of like, I look at something, I'm like, oh, I really want that. And then I start telling myself why it's okay to get it, and then I don't, or I do. And I'm the same. I'm exactly the same. It's just my line is slightly different. I just find that the more that I move the line in the direction of my environmental values, the more joy, community, and connection it brings me. So I'm willing to challenge myself more, the more that I do it. But I believe what you said at the very beginning, at the top of this, was we all have to do it. We all will get to do it. I mean, we all like walking out in the woods to, let our minds roam free, more than walking through a busy traffic intersection with horns honking and all. That's, I'm moving in that direction. I'm maybe a couple steps ahead of others. My goal is in part to be a role model, but that's not really why I do it. I hope that people see that as a role model, but there's a joy that people are missing. And that's what I'm trying to share. And some people get it, some people don't. But if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear people getting it a lot, just a little bit at a time.
Well, I've definitely been getting it since I started, since you and I met, Josh. So I really appreciate it. Can you, before we go, just leave us with a couple upcoming guests or some exciting things that you have going on with the podcast? Because wow, we're at time. If you listen to a couple of episodes now, deals are happening while I'm talking to people. There's this whole community of Deming. If people know W. Edwards Deming, he led a transformation of industry years ago on the scale necessary for us now. And you can hear me talking to the head of the Deming Institute, one of their main trainers. And I could tell there's going to be a Deming summit coming up soon. There's also, with the evangelicals and conservatives, my actual practice resonates a lot with them in a way that I never realized before. And so I can see a panel coming up there soon too. You can hear it happening in the episodes. I think people listen to it and be like, oh, I wonder when that's going to happen. Cool. Send us a link. We'll make sure we put that in the recap. But
okay,
Josh, always amazing. 3:30. I can't believe we should extend this. I feel like we should put some more time on the end of these things, that they always end too soon. But Joshua Spodek, Leadership in the Environment, soon to be this sustainable
life.
I like that a lot. Check it out. Josh is a great friend, a regular guest, and an amazing partner. So this is wrapping up episode 21 of the SoulBuffalo Earth Report. We are going to be back on Thursday with a very special announcement involving our 2021 plans with our amazing partners, Miss Erin Simon from the World Wildlife Fund and Mr. John Hocevar from Greenpeace. So really going to be, we talk a lot about what we're going to be doing next year. I'm super excited, and a big press release coming out Thursday as well. So I'll leave that on I'll tease with that, but thank you so much for everybody coming out and watching the SoulBuffalo Earth Report. Thank you again, Josh. We really appreciate it. Everybody have a really great day.
Thank you, Dave. I can't wait for Thursday's episode now.
All right.